Right, let me start with something that stopped me in my tracks this week. So I was going through the morning reports, coffee in hand, nothing unusual, and this one made me put the cup down. PSG are publicly calling Kvaratskhelia untouchable, their own words, untouchable, and yet his agents are privately telling Arsenal they are open to a move. Both of those things are true at the same time. Now think about that for a second. Because if the player's own camp is already having conversations, what does untouchable actually mean in practice? And there is one detail buried inside this story, one that almost nobody is talking about, that completely changes how you read that question. We will get to it. But first, does Arsenal have any realistic path here? That is exactly what we are getting into today. Stay with me because this one goes deeper than the headlines. Welcome back to Amelia Arsenal Update. I am Amelia. This is where we go past the noise and actually work out what is happening at Arsenal. If you are new here, good to have you. Hit subscribe before we go any further. We do this every time a story is worth understanding properly. Right, let us go. So the story came out through The Independent. Arsenal are exploring the possibility of signing Kvaratskhelia this summer. And I want to do something straight away that most coverage has not bothered to do. I want to define the word exploring because that word is doing a lot of work in this story, and if we get it wrong, everything else we say about it is wrong too. Exploring is not negotiating. Exploring is not advanced talks. Exploring is not close to done. What exploring means in real recruitment terms is that Andrea Berta is asking the right questions. He is building intelligence. He is understanding the player's situation. He is mapping PSG's position. He is working out what the financial picture looks like. That is how elite sporting directors operate. You do not wait until June and pick up the phone. You spend months laying groundwork before you ever make a formal approach. So when you read Arsenal are interested in Kvaratskhelia, what that actually translates to is Arsenal are doing serious homework on a serious target. And this detail matters more than most people realise because the homework phase is where deals are either made possible or quietly killed before they ever become public. So now whether that homework leads anywhere, that is the question. And to answer it properly, we need to talk about something that has been building at Arsenal for 2 full seasons now. Here is what I keep coming back to. Is this a genuine pursuit of Kvaratskhelia specifically, or is Arsenal establishing a market position to unlock a more realistic deal somewhere else? Because those are genuinely 2 different things. And the answer to that question changes how you read almost every update that comes out of this story between now and the end of the season. I will give you my honest verdict on that later, but first, let us build the case from the ground up. First, for anyone who needs the full picture on Kvaratskhelia, he is 25 years old, joined PSG from Napoli in January 2025 for around €70 million, contracted until 2029. This season alone, he has been one of the most dangerous attacking players in Europe. 11 Champions League appearances, double-digit goal contributions in the competition. He was the Champions League winner last season. He scored in the final. And just 2 days ago, he was appointed captain of the Georgian national team. This is a player at the absolute peak of his powers. And look, I will be honest, when you line up those numbers in front of you, the first reaction is not calm analytical thinking. The first reaction is imagine that in red and white. But here is the part I want you to hold on to, and I mean really hold on to it, because when we come back to it later in this video, it reframes this entire transfer story. Last month, February 2026, Kvaratskhelia sat in front of cameras and said on record that he wants to become one of PSG's greatest ever players. Keep that in mind. We will come back to that shortly. Now let us talk about why Arsenal want him. And honestly, this is the part of the story I think matters most, because the question is not just, do Arsenal like Kvaratskhelia? The real question is, does Arsenal actually have a left-wing problem serious enough to justify going after the most expensive winger in their history? And the honest answer is yes. This is where things change. If you have watched Arsenal over the last 2 seasons, and most of you watching this have, you already know what I'm about to say. Martinelli. When he is right, he is electric, running at defenders, sharp, aggressive, direct. At his best, he is genuinely exciting to watch. And I say this as someone who has spent the last 2 seasons trying to make the case for him every time the criticism came. But that version of Martinelli, the one that made everyone think he was going to be a top 10 winger in the world, has become less and less frequent. His output in the final third has dropped. His decision-making in tight areas has become readable. He has gone from a player you build a plan around to a player you build a plan despite. That is a hard thing to say about someone who has given a lot to this football club. but it is the honest, analytical reality. And Trossard, brilliant footballer, smart, versatile, professional, but Trossard was never the long-term answer at left wing for a team with genuine title ambitions. He is high-quality rotation, he covers multiple roles, he contributes when called upon, but he is not the solution to the structural problem. So here is where we are. 2 seasons of title challenges, 2 seasons of the left side being the most predictable, most easily contained part of Arsenal's attack. Berta can see that, Arteta can see that, the data shows it clearly, and honestly, so can every Arsenal fan who has sat there watching us dominate possession and then run into a wall on the left side. You have felt it, I have felt it, something has to change this summer. The only debate is what that change looks like, and that debate leads us to something I think most coverage has completely overlooked. And this right here is where things change, because once you accept that the left wing must be addressed, the next question is not, do we want Kvaratskhelia? The question becomes, does the solution have to be Kvaratskhelia specifically, or is his name attached to a need that could be solved another way? Let me explain why that matters. There is a pattern in elite recruitment that rarely gets discussed. Sometimes clubs identify the best possible version of a profile, the player who represents the ceiling of what they are trying to achieve. And they go public with that interest, not necessarily to sign him, but to change the temperature of every other conversation they are having. The signal to the market becomes, we are prepared to operate at the very top level. We are not looking for bargains. We are not a club that settles. What does that do to every other negotiation? It changes it completely, because now every club with a left winger who fits the profile knows Arsenal are serious. Arsenal have Berta running their recruitment. Arsenal have real ambition. I am not saying this is definitely what is happening here, but I am saying if you are trying to understand what Berta is actually doing, this lens is worth looking through. And when I show you the tactical picture in the next section, you will understand exactly why this profile matters so much to Arteta. Right, let us get into the football now, because if Kvaratskhelia did join Arsenal, the tactical fit is genuinely remarkable. And here is the part most people have completely missed in this conversation. Think about what Arteta actually demands from his left winger. You have to press aggressively from wide positions. You have to invert into the half space and find combinations in tight areas. You have to build a fluid, interchanging relationship with the left back. You have to contribute to build up under pressure. And you have to track back because the press starts from the front. That is an extremely demanding role, one of the most tactically complex wide positions in European football. Now think about where Kvaratskhelia plays at PSG. Luis Enrique, possession dominant, high press, positional discipline, fluid wide rotations, defensive responsibility from attacking players. Sound familiar? It is almost the same system as Arteta. Kvaratskhelia has been performing all of these responsibilities at PSG for over a year now. The tactical adaptation risk, the thing that kills so many transfers, is close to zero here. And here is what most people are missing when they talk about this transfer. The conversation about Kvaratskhelia is not really about adding another dangerous winger to the squad. It is about solving a structural flaw that has been Arsenal's ceiling for 2 consecutive seasons. Think about it this way. Every team that sits deep against Arsenal, every team that parks 2 lines of 4 and dares Arsenal to break them down, they know something. They know the primary danger comes from Saka's side, so they overload the right channel, they crowd that area, they make Saka work against double coverage in tight spaces. And the left side, they are not afraid of it. Martinelli running in straight lines, manageable. Trossard coming inside on his right foot, predictable. Now put Kvaratskhelia on that left side. Suddenly, you cannot commit your defensive resources to one channel, because if you do, he punishes you from the other. And this is the real point. This detail matters more than people realise. It is not one position improving. It is the entire defensive calculation that every opponent makes when they set up against Arsenal. Gyökeres through the middle, Saka on the right, Kvaratskhelia on the left. Genuinely, how do you set up against that front 3 without leaving someone free? I have been thinking about that all week and I do not have a clean answer. But here is where everything shifts. Because the tactical case for this transfer is almost perfect, and yet there is one factor sitting right at the centre of this story that changes the entire picture. Right, now let us deal with the detail every outlet has led with. Kvaratskelia's camp is open to the idea of Arsenal, and I want to be careful here because I think this is being significantly overinterpreted. Here is something worth understanding about how agents operate. An agent who tells the world my client has no interest in any other club, full stop, has just reduced his client's leverage permanently. Agents do not do that. They stay open. They let conversations breathe. They create optionality even when the player has no intention whatsoever of moving. That is the job. So does the open signal mean nothing? No, it means something. If PSG had closed the door entirely through back channels, told Arsenal this conversation ends here, we would not be having this discussion. The door is unlocked. That is real. But, and this is where I genuinely had to stop and reassess. Remember that statement I told you to hold on to at the start of this video? This is where it matters. 2 weeks ago in February, Kvaratskhelia told cameras on record in his own name that he wants to be one of PSG's greatest ever players. When I went back and read that statement properly, it changed how I was reading this entire story. That is a public statement. That is the player speaking, not an agent, not a source, the player. And as an analyst, I put more weight on that than I do on an anonymous camp briefing. The stated ambition of the player is PSG. The agents are doing what agents do, keeping options alive. Both things can be true, but do not let the agent story override the player's own words. That would be a mistake. And it leads us directly to the number that makes this entire conversation either possible or not. Now, let us talk about the number nobody wants to say out loud. £160 million. That is reportedly what PSG would want for Kvaratskhelia. £160 million. That is reportedly what PSG would want for Kvaratskhelia. We are talking about more than doubling the club's record fee for a player whose club calls him untouchable and who publicly declared his ambition to stay and build a legacy in Paris. Now, can Arsenal afford it in theory if they sell the right players? Potentially, yes. Martinelli could bring around 50 million in the current market. Trossard around 20 million. Add another exit and you are generating meaningful headroom. But here is the complication. Arsenal operate under Premier League squad cost ratio regulations. This is not a simple net spend equation anymore. The framework is more restrictive than that. And spending the majority of a summer budget on a single left winger, however generational he might be, leaves other structural problems without solutions. Arteta still needs midfield cover. He needs defensive depth. He needs decisions made on the goalkeeper situation. The squad has multiple needs, not just one, and that is the financial tension inside this story that most of the coverage is simply not addressing. So when you put everything together, the tactical picture, the financial reality, the players' own words, here is where I land. So what do I actually think? Right now in March 2026, this deal is structurally implausible, not impossible, but implausible in its current form. For it to work, you need three things to move simultaneously. PSG need to soften their public position. Kvaratskhelia himself, not his agents, the player, needs to push for the move. And Arsenal need to generate enough sales to make the numbers function. All three at once in a single summer window. That is a significant ask. My honest read, and you can challenge this in the comments, I genuinely want to hear it, is that Berta is doing exactly what the best sporting directors do. He is establishing Arsenal's ambition at the very top of the market. He is telling every agent, every club, every player Arsenal operate at the highest level now. And when the Kvaratskhelia conversation inevitably stalls, he is already positioned to pivot to the next best profile with his negotiating credibility already established. Nico Williams at Athletic Club, Anthony Gordon at Newcastle, Rafael Leão at AC Milan. All of them fit the tactical requirement. All of them are significantly more financially accessible. And all of them become easier to negotiate for once the world knows Arsenal were prepared to go to 160 million. That is not failure. That is elite recruitment strategy. That is the Berta way. But there is one more layer to this story, and honestly, this is the part that hit me harder than any of the transfer numbers. Before we look forward, there is one more thing I want to address, because it is the real story buried inside all of this, and this is the part that hit me harder than the transfer numbers did. If Arsenal are openly exploring a left winger of this calibre, that is a signal. Not a press release, not an announcement, but a real clear internal signal. Gabriel Martinelli's Arsenal career, in my honest assessment, is in its final chapter. And I think it is worth saying that properly, because this is a player this club invested in, a player this fan base grew attached to. He arrived as a teenager and showed everyone who he was. I know a lot of you watching this have a lot of affection for him. So do I, but football is not sentimental. Berta did not come to Arsenal to honour the past. Faye came to build what comes next. Whether the signing is Kvaratskhelia or someone else, the left wing is being restructured this summer, and Martinelli almost certainly will not be part of what comes after it. I think acknowledging that honestly matters more than just talking about the player coming in. And that brings us to the final question. What do we actually watch for between now and the summer? So what are we watching for between now and the summer? First, Arsenal's Champions League run. A quarter-final against Sporting CP is coming. If Arsenal go deep, semi-finals, final, that changes the financial picture and the attractiveness of the club to a player of Kvaratskhelia's ambition. Players want to be at clubs competing for the biggest prizes. A deep UCL run is not just a trophy chase, it is a recruitment tool. Second, watch the end-of-season interviews. If Kvaratskhelia gives any kind of answer about his future that contains ambiguity, that is the moment this story becomes live again. Right now, his public position is clear. That can change. Third, watch PSG's own summer plans. If they identify a target that requires financial firepower, suddenly selling at 160 million becomes a conversation worth having for them too. And fourth, watch Martinelli. When his situation becomes public, and it will, the entire left-wing narrative becomes unavoidable. The summer has already started in terms of intelligence. By June, we will know if this was a genuine pursuit or the most sophisticated market positioning move of Berta's Arsenal career. Look, I will be completely honest with you. When I first saw this story, before I started going through the data, part of me wanted it to be straightforward. Kvaratskhelia at the Emirates, linking up with Saka on one side, Gyökeres through the middle, Ødegaard pulling the strings. That is not just a good football team. That is a genuine problem for every other club in Europe. And if you are an Arsenal fan, you felt exactly the same thing when you read that headline. I know you did, because I did too, but the analyst in me had to be straight about what the evidence actually says. The obstacles are real, the financial complexity is real, and the player's own words from last month point toward Paris, not London. What I do believe completely is that the left-wing problem gets solved this summer. Whoever the player turns out to be, Berta did not join this project to leave the same structural weakness in place for a third consecutive season that I am certain of. Now, I have given you my read on this, but I want yours. Do you think this is a real pursuit, or do you think Berta is playing the market and the actual signing ends up being someone completely different? And if you think it is someone else, tell me the name. Drop it below, I will be in the comments. If this broke it down in a way that helped, share it with an Arsenal fan who needed to see it, and I will see you in the next one.